Hello friends and welcome to an RV8 match analysis here with your host, your man, Travis Rudros Pfeiffer. I don't know if I've ever rolled the R in my Rudros name before. Kind of like it. I don't know. What do you think? Anyway, so I will be the player on the top here, and my opponent, Irving Diaz, is on the bottom. Dragoon Nix is his set, and I thought I would show a little fun go through of RVA action. So I'm playing my Final Fantasy VI Fire Ice list. I've been trying to win this tournament with this list for a while now. It's been my favorite list, this opus, mainly just because I like the character so much. It's hardly the best. I don't, for those of you who like tiers, I don't even know what tier you'd call it. Maybe tier 2, maybe. I could see it being weaker. There's no way it's anywhere close to tier 1. It can feel brutal if everything lines up properly, but that's not always easy to do. Anyway, so kind of the theme of this night, as you'll see, I just played Laswell when John joined us here, and Dolphro's his Yuna, is that I have to play... This isn't kind of my typical style of FF6. There's a lot of early Laswell, there's a lot of early Orphan. For anyone who is interested in that list as well, the deck tech, I have made a few changes since then. I would highly recommend putting in the Bahamut summon. It saved my ass several times this night. And in general, it's just better than Zalira. I like the Zalira. It's cheap, but it's just so specific when you can actually use it. Whereas Bahamut, at any time, is great. Can counter a Neo X Death early if you're having an issue. Can take out 2 forwards of 5 cost, which you won't see in one of these matches, but you will see later. So I'd highly recommend that. I also went to just one Shadow forward and put in Orphan, because Orphan's just too damn good not to use, and Orphan shows up big in these matches. As well as I also put in Squall. You would think Fire Ice would be the perfect place for Squall because you have the ability to discard your opponent's hand. So surely his no one has cards in hand will come up all the time, right? Yeah, that never has come up once. So Squall has felt very disappointing. Also, to be fair to him, in this particular list, there is nothing else to really ping a whole lot other than Sabin or maybe the Bahamut, but that's just so much CP. There's no ways to like naturally boost the Squall, so not worried about that. Anyway, so Irving is playing this kind of fun Water Wind Mill style deck, and I knew that because turn 1 I put down the Kate Sith. I see Mind Flayer in hand. He had a Zidane, which I was like, nope, that's gone. There's a 2-cost Zidane. So here he plays a Mind Flayer on me. Now, normally he would get to play this for 3 by tapping the unit, but since I froze it, he had to pitch essentially 3 cards from hand. He will Mind Flare me several times throughout this match, and I will never know what the other card is he looks at. He never tells me, and I just never really think to ask. But as you see in this case, he pulls Edgar. Now, Edgar is funny because Edgar is great for him. It's great to pull from me because then I can't use it, and Edgar is one of my key cards. However, it's meaningless for him. Absolutely meaningless because he has no 6 characters. He has no one to use the ability on. It's legit just, it's a free, yeah, he didn't have to pay for it, but just a 7k body. It's just sitting there. So it's kind of nice he pulled it in the sense that he's keeping me from using it, but it sucks for him because it does absolutely nothing for him. But he puts the body down thinking, well, I'll block the Laswell. This way you're not coming after my hand. Lucky for me, I had Orphan, and Orphan, not only am I going to pluck one from his hand, yeah, it's going to dull the Edgar out of the way, so Laswell is going to get another card from his hand. This is a night where discard is going to be very key, which I honestly can't chalk up to anything other than 1, luck, 2, the style of decks my opponents were playing were pretty late game decks that do want to get set up, so having that early discard pressure does hurt them quite a bit. I'm happy to see another Zidane go into damage. I'm like, sweet, won't have to deal with this card. And yeah, so he had to throw out another card to the Laswell. So he's now down 2 cards. So he's right where he was. He ended last turn with 4, but now he's starting this turn with 4 again as well. Does get Althea. I never want to see that card, but again, I know I've just got this discard pressure on him, so I'm saying, hey man. So he Mind Flayers again, just hoping to get something. And this is what you'll see a lot of players do when they play against discard, right? Is that they'll just play their hand out. So he's just going to spend every card he has because if you can't make me discard, Orphan can't dull, and who even cares if Laswell comes in because... But in a way, I'm a little less incentivized to push with Laswell now because, well, there's nothing to rip out of your hand, so it's weird. Discard just can kind of a weird space because sometimes it can still outright cripple you, and other times people still just top deck answers. I was playing discard against, I think it was Ryan Chen a few weeks ago, and I had him to nothing in hand. I had him, his hand so low where literally the only way he could have come back. No, I wasn't even playing discard, I was playing Avalanche, but he just threw so much of his hand out. His only saving grace was he had to top deck both Robolac Bell and a Crystal Generator, and he somehow did it. Anyway, so he pulls my own Lastwell with this Mind Flare, which does kind of freak me out. I'm like, well, shit, I don't want to start losing my own discard, so I pitch my hand to Amaterasu it. Now, I did have to throw out Interceptor there, which was a fire backup, so there was a part of me that was like, I really don't want to have to throw out this Interceptor. This is my backup. But I also didn't want Lastwell to knock out the Orphan and then him to potentially start getting me back with my discard. So I was like, nope, just get rid of that thing. He still has an empty hand. And I'm like, that's fine. So I just push in with Orphan. I think I draw Hurdy here. Yeah, and I play 2 and play the Hurdy. And John will comment on this too. I'm really locked out of fire CP for most of this match. And again, I did have the Interceptor early, but I threw it out for the Lastwell. I ultimately think that was the right decision, but perhaps I could have done something differently. So he will play the Atomos. Again, he opts to pitch the other card in hand instead of just tapping 2 backups because, hey, I don't want your Orphan to make me discard to then, let me do whatever. Now, the funny thing is, Althea is really bad at the moment because the only thing he can pull back to his hand is Edgar. Well, guess what? Edgar is my card. So if he attempts to bounce Edgar, he's just giving it to me. So I'm not worried at all about I should a lot of times when I'm playing ice, I'm like, I've got to lock out that Althea, Dull Freeze it. And here I'm like, no, okay, please bounce Edgar back to my hand. I would absolutely love that. Here I play Setzer. I had to throw out Sasano. And so I'm like, okay, what do I get back here? The real things I'm thinking is Terra or Celeste. Amaro is just a bit too expensive. Plus, I could send Edgar to the bottom of my own deck. There's just not really a point to that. I think I opt for Terra here simply for the fire CP because I don't think I have any other fire in hand. So I'm like, all right, I've got to have some way to use fire at some point. And again, didn't really want to throw out the Sasano, but I feel, well, I'm doing well. Again, he has no board. He's top deck and everything. I specifically didn't attack because I didn't want to turn on the Atomos. And this will actually come up in a play a little bit later. Maybe I could have because he doesn't have a lot of backups, right? So even if the Atomos swings, there's not much he can reactivate. But my fear was, well, if he draws a backup, he puts it down, that's 3. And then if he can swing the Atomos, he's just going to... So I was just a little hesitant. I was like, nah, I just don't want to turn on the Atomos right now. Here comes Typhon. He's going to send Orphan Pack into the bottom of the deck. He opts not to swing with the Edgar, but I think his point is that he knows Lastwell can't swing in unless I push the Edgar out of the way, which I believe I'm going to do here because I think I draw Charlotte. Or maybe this is the turn I put down Kuchaspel, because I know I do get down the Kuchaspel and the 1 fire backup. But so he's leaving the Edgar there, but again, I don't really have anything to fear from the Edgar. I don't care if he Althea's it. He can Althea his Typhon, but here's the thing. When you're on this low backups, when you have 1 wind and 1 water, it's actually much to your detriment to use Althea because now you have no wind CP. Yeah, there you go. I threw out Shadow to play Terra. I didn't have another backup I could play with Shadow. I never, ever play Shadow out unless I'm guaranteed I have a backup in hand that Shadow can guarantee put out. Because that way, even if you whiff on the reveal, you can still get something out of it. I didn't, so I'm not taking that chance. Instead, I was like, let's put out Terra. I'll get back Amaterasu. Now I'm threatening that, hey, even if you come up with some nice auto ability in this turn, just letting you know I'm going to blow it apart. So I felt fine with that. I'm also trying to redraw into Orphan because he put Orphan down with the Typhon. And I'm thinking, you know what? I really want to get that Orphan back because I think that's going to be key here. Here comes Orin. Nice kind of little magnet for him. He does have to leave a card in hand. But again, that's only relevant if I can make him discard it. I pitch Brynhilder to get down the Kuchaspel. I know Orphan is going to come back into my hand on the next turn, and so I'm very much in I kind of want to just stall for the Orphan. I need to get this fire CP down because if Sabin or Edgar's ever to come out, I have to have something to tap for fire. It'll also make casting things like Amaterasu easier, so I bite the bullet. I just go ahead and discard a summon that I consider just blowing the Orin up with that because it just gets out of the way and I get to draw a card. But again, it's like I need to get this fire CP down. So I do put out Charlotte. So unfortunately, again, I can't knock the Edgar out of the way. I have to knock out Orin. But again, I know, okay, I'm just going to sit here, not let him get to 3, not let him turn on a Tomos. I'll get Orphan next turn. He's still playing on very limited resources. Typhon's not a forward right now. This Edgar doesn't do anything. So I'm still feeling pretty good about where I am. Finally, he does commit an attack with Edgar. Perhaps he also knew he was keeping track that Orphan was the next card on top of my deck. I do not want to lose that Orphan. The burst would be meaningless. So I let Terra just chump block that. I don't really care about Terra's ping. I just needed her to get the Amaterasu back. So I happily block with Terra. Edgar taking out Terra, that just seems wrong, that traitor. But this way I know I'm going to draw into my Orphan, which is what I'm going to do. I'm happy to tap out 5 here. Usually I'll always try to leave the Hurdy up just in case, but again, he hasn't even hit me for a point of damage. I feel very far ahead. Look at the board resources. I get down Orphan. I was like, this is going to be great. I'm going to get 2 cards out of his hand because I'll send the Knights in. Orphan's going to rip one of those cards out right now. And here is where, man, my brain just, there's no other way to put this. I just make a boneheaded move. And I somehow forget something that I just reminded myself of right before I forgot it. So, Orphan takes a card out of his hand. I swing in with Charlotte to put him to damage 3. And I kid you not, when I did that, when I was debating whether I should attack or not, I was like, well, the moment I put him to damage 3, Atomos comes online. And then I thought, well, do I really care? He only has 2 backups. I have Amaterasu in hand, so I can Amaterasu the Atomos. Even if he tends to go, I feel pretty good about attacking. So I was like, I'll send in Charlotte. It'll get him the 3. This will be great. And then not only will I get him another point of damage, I'll rip a card out of his hand at the end of the turn with Lastwell. And then watch what happens. He's on damage 3. I swing with Lastwell. So Atomos is a forward now. He turns Atomos into a forward, blocks, and just kills Lastwell for nothing. And my mind had this moment where I was shocked when the Atomos turned into a forward. And I was like, he can block me? Oh, right, he's on damage 3. And then I had this argument with myself where I said, Travis, you just reminded yourself of that. How did you forget? Somehow, some way, my mind, like, I don't know if I looked at Typhon and thought, oh, he's not a forward, he can't block, I'm fine, and forgot that was Typhon and not Atomos. I don't know. I just lost Lastwell for nothing. He got to keep an extra card in hand. And trust me, I'm like kicking myself at this point. It's like, oh my goodness, like I was about to just step on his throat, and I just gave him an easy opening. So sure enough, he gets a 2-cost backup, puts down, to get this, and I think he does go for Atomos here, if I am not mistaken. Yep, he activates Atomos. Now, in theory, I could have just blocked with Orphan, and then either force something else out of his hand or just force him to Althea it back. But I was like, no, you know what? I had a Setzer and a Squall in hand. I didn't really picture the Squall doing a whole lot at this point. I was like, the Setzer, obviously, I've already played. I was like, I'm just going to Amaterasu this thing. Let's get it off the field. Plus, now if he does have anything else in hand he wants to play out, he has to pay it the hard way. So I feel pretty solid about this. The Squall, too, isn't going to take anything out on that field at this point. Yeah, it'd be an extra attacker, but I think Atomos are hitting Amaterasu. And again, you don't want to panic with certain cards, right? Because Atomos is one of those cards you're like, ugh. So here's what he does. He counters with the Famfrit, which again does cost a card in hand because he didn't get the reactivation. And maybe that's what he was anticipating too, is like, oh, well, I'll just do this. I give up Charlotte. I was like, well, I'm not giving up Orphan. Orphan is my beater. And the nice thing is he's still stuck with a card in hand at this point, so Orphan is going to continue to do Orphan things. Plus, he still doesn't have Typhon online as a forward, so despite my dunderheaded play of just giving up Lastwell for nothing, I feel decent about at least the recovery of getting the Atomos out of the way. Orphan's going to rip that last card out of his hand, dull the Orin out of the way. I swing in. He takes another point of damage. John was saying on the commentary later that he was really surprised Irvin was just keeping this Edgar around. And I have to admit, I'm kind of surprised too. The Edgar doesn't really do anything at this... Well, it never did anything, but it's especially... Like, what does it do? It's just a body. So I don't know if he was worried about it, like, coming back to my break zone. I don't know. I don't really have a way to recur Edgar, though, in Fire and Ice, other than the Setzer, who's already down. So I just put out Sabin. I'm hoping to draw into my own Edgar at some point. Sabin, unfortunately, costs 2 because I've only got 2 6 characters down there on the backup line. But again, I've still got 2 8K beaters. And right now, body size really is mattering, where he's having to top deck every turn. He doesn't have this Typhon. He has 7Ks. Here comes Null. And so that makes me go, ooh, and I actually have a moment here because I think I still have Bahamut in hand, which I can't cast at this point. Or maybe I have Bahamut on the next turn. I know I considered Bahamut with the Null at one point. He attacks with Null, does his Vanishing Trick. And Null is an interesting card to play against because I have to really try to decide, okay, what is he most likely going to do with this? I'm thinking he's going to break my Orphan. I'm thinking, okay, he's probably going to break my Orphan. I don't think he's going to search for another forward, especially with so little in hand. Very unlikely he just deals me a point of damage. So most likely thing is Orphan's a continued threat. He's probably going to break that. I guess he could theoretically break Sabin as well, or even my Setzer. I'm pretty safe he's not going to break my Setzer. Like I said, Orphan is, in my mind, he's absolutely going to break my Orphan. So there's no card to make him discard this turn, so I can't do anything, but it doesn't matter. Sabin and Orphan are both bigger than him. And so here, I'm just going to put him to 6, force him to have to block everything. He's got to be now more cautious about bringing the Null in. And then what he opts to do here, I'll skip ahead, because what he opts to do is he blocks with Orin and then opts to Althea it. I have a Bahamut in hand here, and part of me is like, well, maybe I should Bahamut this Orin, then just get rid of it. However, I let him pull it into his hand. Yes, he has 2 in hand, and his Null's going to come back, but my reasoning is that, well, he now also has no win CP. So to replay the Althea alone, he's going to go down to 2 cards in hand, which then leaves you very little room to do anything on top of that unless he's willing to search with the Null. So I felt pretty good about that. Plus, now I know I don't want this Null to go off every turn. Now I can Bahamut this Null when it returns, which is exactly what I'm going to do. He opts to break Sabin here. Let me rewind that a little bit. Yeah, so he comes in, he opts to break Sabin instead of Orphan, which at first really surprised me. I thought you would want to kind of get rid of the continued discard threat, but I also understand if I do get the Edgar out, Sabin is now just going to remove everything from his board, so maybe that was the right call. I just opt to Bahamut the Null. I think I hit Edgar for 5 as well, but that doesn't end up mattering, so now his Null's gone. Yeah, I put 5 on both of them. Yes, I lose Sabin, but from my point of view, too, I'd actually rather lose Sabin because I can get back Sabin with Edgar once Edgar comes out, or if I happen to hit a Setzer on a burst. Whereas Orphan, I just have no way to reclaim that card. So I was personally pleased that he didn't get rid of the Orphan. But again, I understand that he's thinking, oh, well, I don't want an Edgar to come down, and then the Sabin just starts picking me off. And to be fair, too, he likely thought he was going to be able to keep using Null over and over again. So he's thinking, well, I'll just get Sabin this turn, get Orphan on the next turn. Now, he does pull Clavat back to his hand, and then plays it again. Since he's on damage 5, Clavat just lets him draw 2 cards, but it requires the backup to be broken. So he's in this weird spot, and again, discard is working in my favor, that he's got 5 in hand, but he's only got 1 backup out. So again, even if you play something like Althea, that's 2 cards out of your hand, and you can't even use that very win CP you just put down. So he was clearly digging. He's digging for an answer here. So what he opts to go with is he ends up playing Lulu to get back a Mind Flayer. And his goal is to try to Mind Flayer again, thinking, well, maybe. And he was telling me that too. He was like, we talked about it afterwards. He was like, I was trying to debate whether it was is it worth it to go for this high rolliness of the Mind Flayer? Because so far, he hasn't pulled anything amazing. I mean, the last well was fine, but I countered it. And I can't remember if I had Amaterasu in hand for the Lulu. I might have, but I was just thinking, well, I don't really care if he Mind Flayers me. Hoping he doesn't get anything great. I don't think he does. Yeah, so he gets a Cyan backup, which he can play for free, but it's fire CP. That doesn't help him. It gives his characters 1k Brave, so he technically could attack with the Edgar right now if he wanted to, but he opts not to. And I probably don't blame him. I mean, what if he hits a burst that just knocks him out anyway? Why take that risk? And this turn, I've got a pretty nice... pretty nice surprise in my hand, and it'll be both thematic and impactful game-wise. So he has 1 card left in hand. I just go to combat, have Orphan rip that out. Orphan's going to knock Edgar out of the way. He's the bigger... I mean, I can get over both these bodies, but just in case. Swing in. He lets me... I put him to 6. Now, I bring out Big Bad Umaro, which means I get to yeet Lulu all the way to the bottom of the deck, and I get to freeze Edgar. So he legit is going to have no forwards who can do anything. and he's going to draw 2 cards and have 2 backups. And so that's pretty much the game right there. Worked out well for me. It was, kind of a weird game in a sense that, and John was saying this on the cast, I had all ice backups until I finally got that Kuchaspel. I didn't really get to do a lot of 6 stuff. This was mainly a game of Orphan and Laswell putting on their pressure. I never saw Locke. I never got to bring Celis down. I never drew into my own Edgars, so never got to do any of that. So it was really, but luckily the pressure of Orphan and Laswell and keeping his hand low, it also really helped that the Mind Flayer didn't pay off big for him. If he'd have gotten a great card for me, that could have really, really sucked. Orphan is kind of funny because I think I only have one of him in this deck, and he shows up constantly. So, hey, I'm grateful for it. But yeah, that was a nice 7-0 victory for me. Overall, looking back on it, I played pretty cleanly other than that boneheaded Laswell attack. Luckily, it didn't end up mattering. I still took a clean victory, but man, I wish you could have felt my thoughts of this weird surprise of oh no, he's on damage 3, he just blocked. And I'm like, wait a minute, didn't I just tell myself, don't, when he's on damage 3, you got to be careful? It's insane. I somehow reminded myself and forgot within the span of 10 seconds. So, whatever. In round 2, I faced Brian Garrity. He was doing a lightning, earth, wind, storm kind of deck that had Verstale and Locke and Neo X Death and just kind of all this crazy stuff. Used the 2CP Earth Sophie a lot to try to come in and clean out my forwards. And again, that was a match Bahamut was huge in because he'd have Sophie, I had Locke on the field, and he would cast a 5-cost character, Wool or whoever, and he would, want Sophie to double the damage, but if you kill it on the stack and it's not there to see it resolve, the damage doesn't double, it just does its normal 5. So I think twice I prevented his Sophie from killing me by just hitting it with Bahamut on the stack. That was a fun match, close one. Definitely difficult. Another match where kind of discard pressure put it on. So then I get to move on to the finals against Austin Vandersteen, I believe his name is. He gets to go first. I went first in my other 2 matches, but he gets to go first. And he does turn 1 Nordstalin, gets Fiona. I'm like, all right, we're dealing with some kind of wind shenanigans, maybe wind ice. And lucky for me, so I had a bit of a strange hand. It wasn't terrible, and the reason I kept it is because it has my starting hand had 1 fire backup, which is red 13. It was the only backup, but I also had Laswell and Charlotte and plenty of ice CP. So because of that, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to slap down this red 13, slap down Laswell, because I knew I was going second, so I was like, whatever he puts down. And when I saw this too, I was like, well, this is perfect. I need to go aggressive anyway. Whatever he's playing, I'm not going to beat it in the late game. You have to push this stuff down early. He searched out Fiona with the Nordstalin. Don't remember if I said that. And John was saying, too, with the red 13, some players might hold on to this card because it's technically removal on entry. And at least in this particular situation, I didn't think that was the right idea. I just want a backup. In this way, again, I can now cast Amaterasu at its proper cost by just tapping the red and anything else. So maybe there are some matches it is right to wait, but especially if this is the only thing you see early, like a VV, like a Blaze, anything else, I think you may just need to forego the potential if he puts out a forward, whatever. The other thing is, too, seeing he's playing this wind list, I'm like, what are the, it's going to be a while before he puts a forward out, so I just need to go ham. Hope he can't do anything about Laswell immediately. So, yeah, I'm sure he's wanting to, I don't know if he had Althea in hand, do a nice Nordstalin into Althea into whatever, but I'm like, nope, I don't care what your weird plans were. Laswell's now going to say, too bad. So he opts to just play Fiona. He lets Laswell hang out there, which is fine by me. Anytime someone gives me a free shot to just have Laswell go in and take a card out of your hand, I am happy to do that. We send Laswell in. Take out 1 Luso. That's 1 less Luso to deal with. For once, the what I hit into damage was actually quite nice. Another thing about this deck, too, is I feel pretty safe attacking because I know this wind ice, whatever, doesn't run a lot of EX bursts. So I feel pretty good attacking. Plus, again, there's no way I'm going to beat this deck late game, especially if it's beating me in the backup race, so I've got to end it as fast as I can. I pitch Locke to put out Charlotte. Charlotte's going to go in Dull Freeze. Now, there was a moment, and John kind of talked about this on the cast. I had debated actually playing the Lockout as well. So we'll go to end phase. He's going to be down a backup. He's going to go to 3 cards in hand, and I'll pass to him. I had considered playing the Lockout, The thing is, there's no other 6 characters on the field, so Locke will not get a discard on entry. If Locke had a discard on entry, 100% Locke is coming down there. However, and I actually did this against Brian, there is something to be said for, hey, if you don't do anything, I'm going to rip 2 cards out of your hand next turn. The Knights are going to pull one with Lastwell, and Locke's going to pull one as well. So I had considered that, but I was just a little afraid of overcommitting resources, and I was like, maybe it's just better if I hold something bigger in his hand. So yeah, here I see he's doing the Ice Wind, his Sid, and I actually said to him, I was like, well, shoot, I wish I was drawing that card. You know, I want to play Banana Sid on my backup line. He goes to get his lock. I am a hair scared here, but I'm also like, well, I don't think he's going to pitch his entire hand to put that out right now, just to Dull Freeze 2 and have me discard. So I was like, I really don't think he's going to be able to cast that too much. And he opts to, I believe, pass back at this point, just trying to keep his hand healthy, which is, you know, something you could do to quote-unquote combat discard. Just, hey, yeah, he's going to rip one out with the Knights, but don't worry about that. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's not Orphan. Okay, so I go in with Lastwell, go in with Charlotte. So I already put him to 3. And so I already, okay, I'm going to get 1 out of his hand at the end of the turn. And then here's the thing. He was ready for that. Okay, so he's going to make me discard 1. He wasn't ready for me to make him discard 2. And it's not Orphan here. I believe I put out Celeste. And Celeste, I can either search for another copy of Locke or I can make him discard. And I had to debate that for a moment, but I was like, well, Locke still doesn't have enough 6 characters to have the on-entry effect. And I'm not saying you have to do that effect, but it just didn't quite feel right. Whereas again, I thought, if I make him discard here, yeah, so I throw out Vayne and Sabin, put out Celeste, say, give me another one out of your hand. And he even said, oh no, I wasn't anticipating having to throw out 2 cards. Which means he's going to start his turn, yeah, with 3 backups, but also only 2 cards in hand. So he has to go down to 2. He'll start his turn with 4. The other nice thing is Celeste now has this pressure too, is if I party attack, I can get Celeste's trigger to either start getting back 6 characters or freezing out his stuff. So he puts out Bismarck, and instantly I'm like, ah, great, this card. Luckily I have Charlotte on the field, so I don't fear it as much, but it's still Bismarck. It's still a pain in the butt, and it's going to help him combat the discard if he starts bouncing stuff back to his hand and getting card draw, which he opts to do. Now, here's the thing, too, and I wonder if he could go back on this, if he would do that again, because the only problem with that is that's great when you're on 5 backups or you're doing a Typhon or a Zidane. He only has 3 backups, so he's now down to 2, but he does keep his hand healthy. So, as I go to my turn... Yeah, so what I opt to do is I party attack with Celeste and Charlotte. Now, I have a huge decision to make here because you can see in my break zone, I have Sabin, Umaro, Locke, and another Sabin. So I've got a few options. I could get some Sabins. The only thing is he's still going to cost 3. He's kind of expensive. Or the other thing, what I had really considered here is getting Umaro. Is like, do I just get Umaro? It would cost me my entire hand, but play out the Umaro, send Bismarck packing. Just say, no, this whale is not going to generate value for you. I opt not to do that. I said, you know what? The thing was, I don't remember what I had in hand, but I wasn't ready to just pitch my entire hand out like that. And that was going to be very all-in for me. I was like, if I lock out his backups, even if he can get like an Atomos down or something, it's still going to cost him quite a bit to, have to do that. Some people asked in chat, why didn't we party with the Laswell? Because Laswell needs to be alive to see the trigger. And I think if I party with Laswell, he 100% just steps in front of that. I dole the red 13 for the fire CP, get out my Interceptor. I really like having Interceptor here because, again, as I'm being this aggressive, I'm now setting up the threat that, hey, you have to always keep potential haste in the back of your mind that I could just haste out of nowhere and kill you. Laswell's going to rip one out of his hand. He does start with 5 in hand with a Bismarck on the field, which I don't like, but I think it does end up being pretty crucial that I had knocked both his backups out. Worst thing I could see here is an Atomos, because then he just could get him right back. But again, he's still playing stuff from hand to do it. He can't like tap the 2, play Atomos, then do his next thing. He's got to play everything from hand. So was it ultimately the right move? We'll find out. I did heavily, though, consider putting out the Umaro just to say, nope, fuck your Bismarck, you're going packing. The other thing, too, was I think it could have been okay with that because, again, this deck doesn't have... it's board wipes or Luso, Barrel Eye, things of that nature. But again, usually that requires setup. So we'll see. You know, we will see here. So we'll see if it was the right call. Of course, here comes a Tomos. But again, he had to pitch a card from hand. And now, I think he's debating as well. So now he's going to bring Barrel Eye to the field, which is just the worst thing that could have happened for me. However, the backups were important because to get Barrel Eye out, he has to discard his entire hand. He's got to pitch, you know, an ice card and a wind card. Here comes Barrel Eye. It is the second trigger. So Tomos is going to reactivate the 2 backups, and he's going to hit my board for 3k. Plus, he's got the Bismarck ping. So this is bad for me. However, especially looking at it in hindsight, yes, he has 2 backups up. He can't do anything with them. He had to dump all of his cards because I froze both of them. So he can't do anything. He tries to get rid of Laswell, but he forgot he has to target Charlotte. So it's like, okay, well, I'll pick off the Charlotte. And I thought he was actually going to leave Celeste alive because he can obviously turn a Tomos into a forward and duel with Bismarck and take out Laswell, but he actually ends up taking out Celeste here because he's just like, nope, I just don't want to have to deal with that party, which maybe that was the right move as well. Laswell's not as threatening on his own. So, and again, this is kind of what I was afraid of too, is Bismarck. And if he had the draw for it, you know, I don't know if he had the Barrel Eye in hand and the Atomos, or he top decked him or whatever, but he got exactly what he needed, which was Atomos into Barrel Eye with Bismarck. And it was at that moment, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, this is just insane how much value he basically got out of nothing. But it is showing the value of freezing his backups out because, again, he had to dump his entire hand to do that. And he really debated whether he wanted to bounce anything with Bismarck, and he doesn't. He doesn't bounce anything here. He was like, well, your Laswell is going to make me discard 1 anyway. Then I'd just be down to 1. And then what do you bounce? Do you bounce the Tomos? Do you bounce the backup? And just... and then now you don't have a win backup. So, yeah, I think he made the right call there by not doing the Bismarck bounce. And at this moment, I really have to think carefully about what I want to do. So I have Edgar in hand, and I feel like Edgar has to come down no matter what. There are 2 Sabins in the break zone, but unfortunately, I just don't have enough CP. If Sabin was free, I think I could have afforded it, but I don't have enough CP to get out Edgar and get out Sabin and be able to do his ability twice. Like, I don't have enough for both. So what I opt to do here is, of course, I go in with Laswell first. Keep pressuring him on that damage, make him reluctant to swing back. What's really nice about a card like Laswell, too, is even if he hits a burst that says, like, draw a card, Laswell's just going to pluck it out of his hand at the end of the turn anyway, so it's like, go ahead. So then, because I think I've got Edgar, Brynhilder, and I have Setzer in hand, and John comments on this as well. He wonders, like, well, maybe we should have played the Setzer to get something back. So I pitched the Setzer here with another Sabin. See, I had the 3rd Sabin in hand. Because I had almost thought, well, maybe I just put out Sabin, but again, the CP wasn't working out. Edgar, I get back double Sabin, which leaves me with 3 in hand, but again, I only have 2 6 characters, so Sabin still costs 6 right now, so I have to play something from hand to get the Sabin out, so I have to discard, and I'm not giving up the other Sabin, so I'm going to throw out the Brynhilder for Sabin, because part of me wanted to try to use him to, if I can Aura Bolt the Bismarck and cast Brynhilder on it, not only does it die, I'll get to draw a card, but it just wasn't working out math-wise. So I discard 1, play Sabin. I could Aura Bolt Bismarck here and Aura Bolt. I could Aura Cannon the Bismarck and then cast the other Sabin from hand to hit the Bismarck a second time. However, I opt to instead just get rid of Barrel Eye. My reasoning being, he has nothing in hand. He's going to have 2 backups. The last thing I want... And he's got a Tomo, so he has potential to activate something. The last thing I want is a Barrel Eye trigger to go off, hit my board for 3, and then Bismarck just says, bye, Edgar. You're done. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, this will be... I said, I think I can just afford to wait 1 more turn to have to deal with Bismarck. So I opt to just blast... what's his face? Barrel Eye. So many B's. Bismarck, Brynhilder, Barrel Eye. I wonder, listening back to the commentary when John was like, I wish he'd have played the Setzer, I think John was thinking I try to do a bit more of a setup, like, okay, let me recover a little bit. But in my head, I'll be honest, that never even occurred to me. In my head, I'm thinking, no, this game still needs to end as fast as possible. the more time I give him, the more time to let this Bismarck and the Satomo sit there and accrue him value. Like, I've got him on the ropes right now, and I want to keep it that way. I think if I slow down and take the time to Setzer and, like, give him another turn to set up, I'm just worried what could happen, so perhaps that could be the right play, but I'll be honest, I hadn't even considered it. I'm like, let's go pedal to the metal, baby. So he pitches the only other card in his hand for Althea, lets him stand the backup up, doesn't do a whole lot. What he could have done if he really wanted to was Bismarck, like, ping Lastwell, turn a Tomos into forward, ping Lastwell, stand one of them back up, ping him again, but then his forwards would all be done, and I just rush in anyway. And the thing is that Atomos was never going to swing. I've got the other Sabin in hand. I showed that. So if that Atomos becomes a forward, that thing's getting blown to high hell. However, he also kind of realizes, too, oh, wait a minute. If you've got the other Sabin in hand, this should just be game as is. Because now what I can do is just Edgar gives Sabin one free Aura Cannon. Down, forward, Y. Cast it. Use the second one. Bismarck's going bye-bye. Yeah, he pings Sabin on the way out, but I'm like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. And now it's just, he has nothing in hand. The math is just in my favor. He can block once with the Atomos, but that's about it. So I swing with Sabin first. Swing with Edgar. He has to block, which he just doesn't even bother because he's like, what's the point? You'll then just swing with last one and kill me, and GG! Woohoo! My second RVA victory, baby. And I did it with Fire Ice 6. So satisfying. Overall, yeah, this sometimes the nights just go well for you, and I was kind of fortunate to have aggressive situations where my opponents were playing these setup decks, and for once the discard really did help me out. I've had so many of these nights where I'll make them discard their entire hand and they still just constantly draw their answers, and so it's like, well, what am I making them discard for? But tonight, and my opponents told me afterwards too, yeah, I had a lot of dead draws and a lot of stuff where the discard was really throwing me off. So Lastwell is absolutely the MVP. I mean, the dude just put in so much work. Again, not as much 6 as I really would have hoped. They did show up a little bit there at the end. Again, you see in this match, too, I didn't have any ice backups. I just had fire backups. So I did have some weird backup lines. That first match, I mainly had all ice. This one, I mainly had all fire. But in the end, we got there. There are a few plays that when you win, it's a little more difficult for me to determine, well, should I have done something differently? They talked about sequencing there at the right end. Was like, well, instead of attacking with Sabin first, do you attack with Edgar and then maybe force him to block with the Atomos? But given the board state, it didn't really matter. And I don't really see what prevents him from just coming on with Edgar anyway. He just can just block Edgar, but I still go into Sabin Lastwell, so I don't know. Anyway, that was it. Second victory. Feels freaking great, and especially with this deck. I really do like this deck, even though it feels a bit lackluster compared to its contemporaries, but I just love these characters. 6 was the very first Final Fantasy I ever played. Yeah, it was great. It's a shame the 6 package didn't get to show off a little bit more, but hey, Lastwell did what Lastwell did what Lastwell does. All's well, that's Lastwell. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think, and until next time, take care.